Good morning or afternoon, and welcome back everyone to the third session of today's Digital Trade Conference. We've covered Australia, New Zealand and Singapore in the morning session and Japan CPTPP in the previous session. We've now moved over to Europe, so we will be discussing the WTO JSI negotiations and the EU-UK relationship. Delighted to have Ambassador Simon Manley, UK's permanent representative to the WTO, United Nations and other international organizations with us today. He will be delivering the keynote, opening up the discussion that we will be having afterwards with an excellent panel. So Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Sabina, look, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to address you all, really privileged to be speaking to such a dynamic sector of the economy. And let me also welcome your blueprint for UK digital trade, which I think offers us such a kind of rich repertoire of ideas and data about what's actually happening out there. Look, I've only been in Geneva a little over kind of 6.5 weeks, so I fear, and I know there are far more eminent people coming to speak after me on the panel who have probably forgotten more than I shall ever know about the world of the WTO. But let me have a go about sort of both contextualizing where we are on digital trade in the WTO. Also offering a few thoughts from here as to how we move this forward, and in particular, how we work with business, how we work with the tech sector to advance the WTO's work in this area. And look, I mean, you all know I'm almost as new as the new Director General of the WTO, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She has brought enormous energy and new ideas to the organization. There's a really challenging agenda ahead of her as we kind of lead up to the next ministerial conference of the WTO, MC12 as it's known, later this year. There are big issues about trade and health, obviously, around vaccines and TRIPS waivers and all the rest of it, about the environment, about the future of the appellate body, as it's known, like some dispute resolution mechanisms, about agriculture, about fisheries. So it is a rich and challenging agenda. But Dr. Ngozi has rightly said that she wants the WTO to be relevant and responsive to the global economy of the 21st century. And that has to be nowhere more true than in terms of digital trade. I say to myself that we want to show by MC12 that the WTO is not only back in business, but also backing business, and that there is a really dynamic new relationship there in place between the organization and business, in which we learn from each other. And I think, when we look at this area, perhaps more than any other, it's an area that affects businesses large and small. I think what we're talking about here today is as relevant to a kind of two-person startup in Shoreditch or Manchester or Glasgow as it is to a multinational business in the digital trade sector. So it's really important. We have two overarching objectives, I suppose, as we look to MC12. The first, I mean, they are kind of big and broad, and you might even say vague. The first is to restore confidence in the bilateral trading system. By showing that we are able and willing to progress what are a series of kind of ongoing and in some cases multi-year negotiations and addressing some of these really tricky issues on the WTO reform agenda. And the second is establishing a work program for the future on global trade, including kind of launching new initiatives, new negotiations. And again, that is nowhere more true than in these areas like digital trade, where, to be honest, over the last couple of decades, in the absence of agreements within the WTO at a multilateral level, industry has moved ahead. The world has changed enormously, not least through its digitalization, and the WTO is, to some extent, risks getting left behind. And we want to see the WTO as an enabler of the recovery from COVID-19, as an enabler of a greener, more sustainable, more digital global economy that reaps real dividends for countries large and small, developed and developing. And I think for us, one of the key positive deliverables for MC12 are the joint statements initiatives. Many of you I know will know, again, more about them than I will ever know myself. But I mean, just to remind everybody, they were launched back at the last ministerial MC11 in December 2017, and they are structured as what we would call in the trade as plurilateral discussions, discussions amongst a group of countries who have similar aims, rather than as kind of formal multilateral negotiations that depend on the kind of consensus rule that prevails within the WTO. We think that these initiatives are a really important contribution to getting those global trade rules moving again, getting them not just more in line with what is already happening in the global economy, but to use them as a means to enable the change that we all want to see in the global economy, as we try and make it, as I say, more green, more sustainable, and responding to the climate crisis that we're facing. So the heart of those joint initiatives is for us, of course, the e-commerce joint statement initiative. We have 86 WTO members already signed up to the initiative, with a really interesting mix, actually, of developed and developing countries, including China, as well as the United States and the European Union. And I think, one of the most interesting things, just listening to people in the few weeks I've been here, is how this experience of the extraordinary pace of digitalization through the COVID pandemic has been as true in some of the world's smallest and developing nations like Rwanda as it has been in advanced economies. And I think that there's enormous strength to take from that for these negotiations on the JSIs. So those negotiations on the JSI on e-commerce they're well underway. We kind of structure them through a kind of mix of technical small group negotiations on specific bits of text, as well as kind of broader, higher level plenary sessions for the amateurs like myself. And the UK, as you'll know, has been a really strong supporter of this initiative right from its inception. We submitted our own preferred text to the initiative back in November of last year, covering key areas, sort of areas that I set out in your blueprint today, areas such as data flows, data localization, source code, customs duties on electronic transmissions, and online consumer protection. And we also recently co-sponsored, I see Christophe there on screen, recently co-sponsored the EU's proposal to update the WTO reference paper on telecommunication services. We're also playing an active role in small group negotiations, where we are trying to work constructively and proposing compromise texts to bridge differences between those 86 countries involved in this effort. We're also now facilitating a small group negotiation on electronic transactions frameworks, another area I know that's covered in the blueprint. So we have 3 co-conveners, as they're called, here in Geneva: Singapore, Japan, and Australia. And I know you're about to hear from my extremely esteemed Singaporean colleague on the panel, so I'm sure we'll want to say more about this. And they're doing a really great job, if I may say, of maintaining momentum, setting ourselves an ambitious work 21 with the aim of cleaning, as we would say, a number of text provisions by the summer, when summer actually arrives in Geneva, as I think we may be having the same problem as you are in London and elsewhere. This initiative is proceeding at pace, but we also, I suppose, need to be a little bit realistic. It's not, I'm afraid, going to conclude by MC12. But what we would like to see is significant progress by then in terms of cleaning, streamlining the text, and we need to maintain that momentum which the co-conveners have managed to establish and push for continued constructive, in-depth discussion on the sensitive but kind of key issues like data. As I said, it's going to, this initiative is, we hope, a real enabler of the global recovery from the pandemic, and we want to see, meaningful rules that are commercially useful for all, but of course, particularly for British tech. I just kind of by saying I am passionate about creating a deeper partnership between government and business, trade, in which there is a kind of more virtuous circle between trade policy and trade promotion and investment promotion, in which we work together to understand the concerns and ideas of business as we forge our trade policy, and in which we keep you informed of the progress of those negotiations, so that you are able to seize the opportunities, whether, as I say, you be a startup or a multinational, to seize the opportunities of the trade openings that we forge with our partners, to grow your businesses and to generate jobs and wealth for the economy. And the rules that we are forging, they are going to be in place for some time, so they need to work. And we need to keep listening to you, to business associations, about how we can forge the right rules to enable the right sort of growth. And my teams, I know, are already working with techUK, with other stakeholders, and we really want to intensify that work over the weeks and months to come. We're very keen to set something up in the margins of the e-commerce negotiations that sets out our key aspirations, and really looking forward also to the WTO public forum on trade beyond COVID-19, building resilience, to sort of find opportunities in which we can both platform the very best of British tech, but also forge those partnerships with our partners across the world, so that we can help deliver a joint initiative that is really going to be a spur to this sector as we build back better. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for all the words of support, but also for the leadership the UK is showing in the WTO GSI negotiations. I'm sure welcomed by a lot of like-minded partners from around the world. So it is great to hear your ambition to kind of carry on this negotiations with leadership, and hopefully we can have some good progress by the MC12. And we'll definitely take you up on all those offers to cooperate further. We've been working very well with your team so far, and we'll continue to do so. So thank you so much, and thanks for being with us today.